Hello everyone, I am Duke, and in this video we're going to be looking at some of the largest, fastest creatures in Trench Crusade and the most vicious ways the game has found to off you the quickest. So while all creatures great and small in the game apparently have access to bombs, bullets and blood magic, this list is a ranking of some of the fastest and worst ways to get taken out of action in the game. Much like in my video of the most twisted creatures, we'll start with an honourable mention and then get down to my personal top 5. If you're new to the channel or the lore of Trench Crusade, then welcome, and for my returning viewers, drop me a like or consider becoming a channel member for access to unique artwork in the channel Discord. But with the introduction out of the way, let's see what we have in store. So first off, I want to talk about one of the smallest and slowest but by no means less deadly entries on this list, and that is the Ecclesiastic Prisoner. If the 100 meters final was brought to you by Roadrunner and the Acme Corporation, that probably wouldn't be far off what I think the end of an Ecclesiastic Prisoner's mad dash would look like. But if you're new to the game, you may be wondering what exactly an Ecclesiastic Prisoner is, and what makes them so deadly despite looking like they've just escaped the stocks with someone's cauldron on their head. Well, I'll tell you. The Trench Pilgrims often get visions and holy messages that compel them to take up arms and fight for the faithful. Most of these pilgrims just take up any old weapon and head out into a procession led by a war prophet. However, some of these pilgrims feel they have sinned in some way, or they are not worthy to fight in the Lord's name due to some perceived, unabsolved wrong. So naturally, these pilgrims decide to absolve themselves of this sin by running into the levant with enough explosives to blow a hole in a brazen bull. And while some may have chosen this role, others are actual prisoners taken by the warband and judged as sinful, at which point they are condemned to the ranks of these penitent powder kegs. Now in the game, an ecclesiastic prisoner is only about as fast as a regular pilgrim with a 6-inch move, but they dash with +1 dice, so couple that with a bomb that goes off with a 3-inch blast and a +1 to wound, all for the price of 55 ducats, and they are an effective weapon at the procession's disposal. But that brings us to the first of the main 5 on our list, and coming in at number 5 is one of the smallest, but one of the fastest units on the list, the Plague Hounds. Now, we all like a good doggo, but these are the worst boys, looking like some form of anteater crossed with a greyhound that got kicked through a sewage pipe. I'm pretty sure you'd be able to smell a Plague Hound far before you could see it, and I don't actually think that would really help you because these are exceptionally fast for something that looks like it's going to fall apart if it sneezes too hard. Now, the terrifying thing about a Plague Hound isn't that they're that deadly on their own in-game, but it's the effect that something like this would have both during and after a battle. The Plague Hounds are one of the many twisted creations of Beelzebub, and their purpose isn't to be a deadly battering ram, but more like a vanguard harassment unit. The Plague Hounds rush forward ahead of the warband, and while they have the same undead fortitude as many other Grail servants, without armour they're still quite a disposable unit. However, due to the virulent plagues they carry with them, they are one of the most effective ways for the Grail to spread, even if their warband is destroyed, because they spread infections and disease with frightening ease. Even if you survive a fight with a Plague Hound and manage to kill the creatures, even if you burn its body to ash and destroy the cult before they reach your lines, a single bite from a Plague Hound is all Beelzebub needs. With the plague injected into an enemy soldier by one of these filthy creatures, a battle won doesn't mean you win the war, as the infection rapidly takes hold and could potentially ravage a whole village or fortification if it isn't contained. So in game this is represented by their spreading infection markers instead of causing blood markers, and their +1 in melee means that the likelihood of them fulfilling their purpose before death is actually relatively high. But as I said, these were one of the fastest units, but not one of the most deadly. And next up, coming in at number 4, we have the Lions of Jabir. So despite looking a bit like something that South Park Al Gore dreamt up while on copious amounts of acid, Lions of Jabir are supposedly one of the good guys, but that won't really matter much when the half Mr. Universe, half lion, half take my strong hand runs you down like feeding time at a starving zoo. Although, if it is any consolation, we do know from a short story that they often actually smell quite lovely, if not a bit metallic. So at the very least, they're not going to smell like your local roller derby tournament when they tear you open. As a side note, if you know what a roller derby tournament smells like, then you really have my sympathies. But if this list was purely based on speed, then Lions of Jabir would be much higher on the list, because with a movement of 8 and a +1 to their dash actions, their effective threat range is 20 inches with a dash and charge. This can even be pushed up to 23 inches temporarily with a wind amulet, which makes them without question one of the fastest units on the tabletop. And all that speed is a delivery system for a pretty decent combat profile as well, since they fight with +1 melee in combat, but the thing that makes them a horrible unit to fight against is they will pin an enemy down in combat. Once in a fight with a Lion of Jabir, you had better hope to whatever deity you pray to that you're able to kill it, or it will maul you in the mud before stalking off to hunt down your comrades. Which brings us to number 3 on our list, and this might surprise some of you because it is the Warwolves. Now, these mangy, chainsaw-faced mongrels from hell are about as close to berserkers from Gears of War than any other unit in the game I can think of, mainly because they might not kill you by tearing you to pieces with the teeth of their bladed helmets, or even with their weirdly long wonky claws, but they might just steamroll through like a desperate festival goer trying to get to a Portaloo. And in the snippets of lore that we have for the Warwolves, they are specifically mentioned to charge through miles of barbed wire to clear it in order for their warbands to advance unharmed. And that helmet, which has become one of their most instantly recognisable features, is actually designed to look like a World War I barbed wire cutter, so not only does that lore snippet make sense in the context, it also makes them a fair bit more deadly in my opinion, and that's because they are specifically designed to charge and cut through anything in their path. Now I can just imagine a warwolf running down some poor unfortunate pilgrim, a bit like that combined harvester scene in Zombieland 2. Pilgrim Kill of the Year, anyone? But exactly how does this terror get realised on the tabletop? Well, with a movement of 8 and a frankly disgusting +2 to dash, it is almost guaranteed to be a wolf-shaped missile being fired into melee from 20 inches away. And when old Chainsaw Face reaches you, it gains +1 to hit with its Chainsaw Maw, which brings this attack to a fairly reliable +3 dice, and alongside a +1 to injure and the ability to ignore armour, you can almost guarantee whatever it hits is about to resemble mincemeat any moment. But if by some weird coincidence that doesn't work, it has a second attack with its shredding claws, but it does strike them with the offhand penalty, bringing them down to a measly +1 to hit. Yeah, I know, right? But the +1 to injure should be able to finish off anything that maw didn't render into paste in the first attack. And with the Warwolf out of the way, that brings us up to our number 2 spot, the Praetors. So these are a 3-faced jackal goat monster with face wings and one unexplained boob, and Praetors because of that are probably one of the most confusing looking commanders on the battlefield. Since they are so demonic and strange looking, it is not uncommon for new recruits in New Antioch to think they've seen the actual devil. But putting aside those odd looks, one of these giant farmers markets gone wrong will mess up just about anyone's day. Just like everything else on this list, they are fast and deadly, being one of the quickest models that also has the ability to fly, which means that unfortunately for anyone from an Azeb to an Anchorite, there isn't much of a chance of outrunning these messed up looking monstrosities. And while they aren't the fastest units on this list, they are able to move around the battlefield far easier because of the fly keyword, and that makes their profile a serious problem to deal with. On the tabletop, Praetors are one of the most deadly profiles available to any warband, with an eye-watering +3 to both melee and ranged actions, which means that whatever they are armed with, that 8-inch move won't leave many places to hide on the board. Now, alongside goetic powers, access to weapons like the Malabranche sword and serpent assault gun, a Praetor is one of the single deadliest units any warband can field. Now, while Warwolves are certainly a more gory spectacle to see in combat, at least death at their hands will come swiftly, and there's not really much of a guarantee of that with a Praetor. Now, combining speed, melee, ranged, and magical proficiency, I feel their spot on this list is certainly justified. However, there's one unit that I feel not only tops this list for its combination of speed, proficiency in combat, and magical ability, but also because it is nigh impossible to put down. With the Praetors out of the way, we are finally at our number one spot for this video. Now, it may not have the overall abilities of the Praetor, but on the tabletop it has the biggest threat range outside of a Wind Amulet line of Jabir, and a vicious melee profile that can be pushed to 3 attacks and boosted by foul magic of its own. But before we get to that number one spot, I do have a quick announcement for you. So, as many of you know, since I passed 3,000 subscribers, I've been getting custom artwork made for the channel, and this month it is these two. Now, they are redacted, and one of them obviously for very good reason, but if you want the Tasteful Artillery Witch artwork or the pinup artwork, join as a channel member, jump into the Discord, and download them from there, and we'll be adding new artworks every month, and you'll always have access to past, present, and future artworks as long as you're a member. Anyway, with that, back to the video. And now we're back to our video. In our number one spot, we have another of Beelzebub's foul children, the putrescent Grigori Gula. This flying skin flap with more teeth than a shark's dentist vaguely resembles an emaciated angel if it was drawn by Junji Ito. Now, if that wasn't terrifying enough, they have a movement of 9, along with the ability to fly and infiltrate, which means there's almost nothing stopping these abhorrent creations from charging into your line turn 1 of the game, a feat near unmatched by many others on this list. And much like other servants of the Black Grail, a Grigori Gula is a corpulent mass of reconstituted flesh, which means that anything other than fire weapons are near incapable of harming it due to a vile -2 dice to wound. If, and without fire weapons the chances are unlikely, a Grigori Gula is taken out of action, it isn't even removed from play. Instead, the first time they are taken out of action per battle round, they go into a dormant state. From here they lay in wait until a thrall comes by that they can consume, returning them to the game so they can continue their reign of terror. So aside from being almost impossible to kill, having the ability to fly over terrain, being one of the fastest moving units in the game with a 21-inch threat range, and being able to infiltrate ahead of their warband as its vanguard, what else makes them deserving of the top spot? Well, they have 2 attacks at +2 dice to hit, and with their rend ability, if they are able to hit both times with these attacks, they are granted a third that also gains +1 to wound. Now, having played one of these in a few games recently, this third attack is remarkably consistent. As if that weren't enough though, being a spawn of the Great Hunger means they gain access to a single power from the Arcanist Putrescere, which can give them anything from the ability to resist the effects of fire, to reducing injury rolls made against them, or even vomiting gouts of plague filth at their enemies. Now, while not being the absolute fastest, which is actually a Lion of Jabir with a Wind Amulet, or the most deadly in combat, which on this list is probably the Warwolf, they are such an all-round threat that I think they edge just ahead of Praetors in this regard. But what do you think? Is the Grigori Gula the fastest, most terrifying unit on the board, or is there another you would have given this top spot to? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoy these top 5 style videos, you can find my other top 5 on the most twisted creatures by clicking the video link to your left. Alternatively, to discover more lore for games like Trench Crusade, 1490 Doom or Conflict 47, click the video link to your right. Don't forget to join as a member and download exclusive art from the Discord server, and for discounts on your hobby supplies, check out my affiliate links in the video description. With that, I'll say thank you for watching, and I'll see you all soon.